short and sweet. So this is my signature assessment project that I have to do for my grad school class. It's like our last project. So we had to find an issue like within our class and identify the problem and then come up with a solution to fix it. So now I'm bringing it to you all because you all also teach first grade in hopes that you can implement it in your own classrooms. So this is our agenda. You can read it. So my vision for this PLC meeting is that as a first grade team, we will come together to discuss matters that benefits our students as a whole. This should be a time of learning and communicating with each other, and we should all respectfully share our opinions to each other. Alright, so there's 3 writing samples. So just like off the top of your head, like what do you see that's wrong with it?
Like that one, like not going across the lines, like maybe pushing their words together too closely.
Yes, it's very hard to read. Absolutely. Like there's no order, there's missing spaces, there's misplaced capital letters. Over here in this middle one, this one does pretty good, but there's like capital letters in the middle, there's no punctuation. But overall, like, you can kind of make sense of this writing. And then the last one, there's no spaces, punctuation is missing, and then there's random capital letters, like, within the writing. So this leads to my problem. So after weeks of observation during my students' daily writing time, I've noticed that they're not producing sentences with correct sentence structure. So most students do not understand that the idea of having more than one sentence in their writing. So, like, if they write an entire page, they just slap a punctuation mark at the end and I'm done. That's one sentence. And it might be 27 sentences, but they still see it as one. So students also are not aware when they're supposed to use capital letters in their writing, and then they're not aware of when to use, or they're not self-conscious or self-aware, I guess, of using spaces between their words, so they all end up jumbled. So I have an article. And really the only thing that, I printed the whole thing, but the big significant part, so I want to point out, is right around, like the first page, so the first like 2 pages. There's 2 pages on one. So I'm going to give you just a minute to look over it, and then we'll discuss it in a second. So one of the things that kind of drew me to this article was right within the first grade at the bottom. It says, like, students should be taught rules for punctuation and capitalization, beginning with the most common rules appropriate to the grade, but they should be encouraged to do their own thing, but then correct it. So I want you to, like, think to yourself, what are the top 3 things that you can focus on for your students to have better sentence structure? So I did the same thing after reading this article. And my top 3 focuses are capital letters in the correct place, spaces between the words, and punctuation at the end of each sentence. These are, I think, the easiest steps to go about, and I think my students really need to benefit from this. Obviously, like, different sentence structure, like as in length of sentences and complexity of sentences, that's going to come later, but we got to get to where we can read their sentences first before we can work on that. So my solution strategies, so one of the things is using mentor sentences. So each week we will go, these sentences, I will pick a sentence from our interactive read aloud, and they go along with our book. So students will see a sentence modeled on the board, and they will identify the good parts of the sentence. And then students will also have practice time to model their own writing after these sentences. So the next thing is a sentence checklist. So students will use this checklist each time that they are writing in their journals. So students will have a dry erase version of this checklist attached to their journals, and that they will record after they write in their journal. So like just a checklist. So if they use capital letters at the beginning, they capitalize names, and they capitalize the word "I," then they give themselves a check mark. Finger spaces between words, they give themselves a check mark, and then if they use punctuation mark after each topic, they'll give themselves a check mark. So then the third thing is using dictated sentences. This is going to be my strategy that I will use to monitor my students' progress of sentence structure with my 3 main focuses. So students will be given a sentence to write, and I will use the checklist on the previous slide to assess their progress on this. So this assessment will be given every Friday. So far I've given it 3 Fridays now. So as you can see, like our first week, like we had several that were a 1, which is mean they only got 1 point. And I think for the most part that was just because they didn't understand what they were doing. So like, after we came back, gave them some instruction on it, the next week we still practiced, their scores and grew, and then they've grown again. Overall, like I wish there was more green over here, but there's not. But I think the more times that we implement this and continue to work on it, that the progress will continue. So these are some student samples. After, they are starting to use their capital letters. There's punctuation in the middle and not just at the end. There's different. It's not just a period. So like that one's using an exclamation point. So yes, our handwriting is not the best, but we can still read it because it's spaced out. So after week 1, students were still getting used to the checklist. Teachers having to remind frequently about using the checklist before the assessment began. During week 2, there was some improvement with student writing. Students are becoming more familiar with the checklist and becoming more aware of how they are writing. So our next steps, students will continue to use the checklist in their writing until they earn a distinguished 3 assessments in a row. So once they earn the distinguished 3 assessments in a row, then they will be able to kind of push that to the side. They won't have to do it every time. The teacher will continue to use mentor sentences to model writing. And then teachers will continue to do weekly dictated sentences for students to assess on these 3 focus skills. So one thing a question that I have like for myself is there a more efficient way to go about this? Like, do they really need to fill out that checklist every time? Like I've seen some benefit of it, but then I also see it's kind of been taking up time too. But I think at this stage, if we get them more aware of what they're writing about, then that will benefit their writing in the future. And that's it. Thanks for watching my presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you.